And so it's with great pleasure that I welcome a senior fellow of the Center for Security Policy, who unfortunately was not able to be here earlier in the program and missed Diana's comments, but who is with us now to talk a bit about that perspective. A woman who hails originally from Egypt, whose father was a Fedayeen who was ultimately killed in the struggle with Israel, and who has seen the light in a way that has, I think, spoken to what Tommy was talking about in terms of the light that hopefully is going to lead us all. Nonie Darwish is the author of numerous best-selling books and an extraordinary resource on these matters, and it's a delight to have you with us. Welcome, Nonie.
Thank you, Frank. What I can add to the discussion really is the magnitude of Islam. And I don't call it radical and moderate Islam because when I was born and raised a Muslim. There was nothing called radical and moderate Islam. The problem with moderate Islam is they don't have books to support their moderation. So they are always shut up by the radicals because the radicals really regard themselves as the true Muslims who follow what the book said. There is no Islamic book that's moderate. And that is our problem in the West. The magnitude of the problem of terrorism really is that terrorism is a norm in the Middle East. It's used at all governmental levels. This is a culture, and I'm very glad that Andy McCarthy mentioned the cultural aspect of this problem, because terrorism is a tool that is used by Islam at every level of government. It is a slave-master relationship. This is a culture where people relate to one another as slave and master. There is no equality between human beings. If you go to Saudi Arabia, if you go even to Egypt, people relate to one another as master-slave. And most of Middle East governments use terrorism as a legal tool. It is a legal tool accepted by Sharia to run the way the government is run. Saudi Arabia uses beheading legally. This is cutting of limbs. This kind of torture that ISIS is doing is legal under Islamic law. So the magnitude of our problem really is huge. And when I heard the president say that we're just over concerned about ISIS, my heart sank. Because culture is everything, and to try to understand terrorism or give it an excuse is really to promote it, to make us look at terrorism as something that can be excused, or it has happened in history before. So what? To desensitize Americans to terrorism that I grew up with. I grew up with being desensitized and accepting terrorism as a tool for government to use against the people. And I'm noticing that America is starting to feel that terrorism is just like Groundhog Day, like the Speaker of the House when he spoke. So it is like a Groundhog Day. We get excited. We see the torture, the beheading, the terrorism, and we forget about it. But it's starting to become a normal thing that I would hate for America to start being desensitized and having terrorism normalized, because people who start feeling normal about terrorism will end up becoming moderate Muslims. That is the problem of moderate Muslims. Moderate Muslims have already accepted radical Muslims. They've already lived under them and lived in a convoluted way to accept them as real. And this is what I would hate to see America compromise with the devil like that. And to make excuses for terrorism, to compare it to historical other acts of violence in history, is really to promote it and to tell Americans, well, face it, this is the future. We have to accept it. Who are we to judge? So when I heard President Obama say that, my heart sank, because this is what moderate Muslims have been living with forever. They don't find terrorism abnormal. It's almost like part of life. I lived under terrorism. I lived under Sharia. I lived in Egypt till I was 30 years old. And I came to America for freedom, and I hate to see this country starting to accept this kind of subversion of human nature, because terrorism has become so much part of nature of the Middle East. It's not just in terror groups. We think it's ISIS or this or that, but no, it's in the family. There are some fathers who would kill their daughters if they don't follow Sharia. Terrorism is part of the nature of the Middle East. This is not just ISIS. I just want to tell the American people this is a huge problem, and it will need huge dedication and awareness on the part of the West to win.
Nonie, thank you. Well done. Nonie, you made a very important point that there really isn't any basis in the sacred texts for the moderation. What we're often told is that actually there's all kinds of texts in the Quran that are peaceable and tolerant of other faiths and so on. And I'd like you to comment on that, but maybe Steve can start us off on the principle of abrogation and how that has affected what is the relevance of those pieces of the Quran that are contradicted by an awful lot of the rest of it. And then over to you.